about these books is they're both English and Christian. This is like a modern version of the older one, The Cloud of Unknowing, Chapter 6. But now you ask me, how am I to think of God himself? And what is he? And to this I can only answer, I do not know. He doesn't know. For with your question you have brought me into that very darkness and that very cloud of unknowing that I want you to be in yourself. By grace it is possible to have full knowledge of all other created things and their works, and indeed of the works of God himself, and to think clearly about them, but of God himself no one can think. And so I wish to give up everything that I can think, and choose as my love the one thing that I cannot think. For he can well be loved, but he cannot be thought. By love he can be grasped and held, but by thought neither grasped nor held. Therefore, though it may be good at times to think specifically of the kindness and excellence of God, and through this may be a light and a part of contemplation, all the same in the right work of contemplation itself, it must be cast down and covered with a cloud of forgetting. And you must step above it stoutly but deftly, with a devout and delightful stirring of love, and struggle to pierce that darkness above you and beat on that thick cloud of unknowing with a sharp dart of longing love, and do not give up whatever happens. We read from Chapter 6 of The Cloud of Unknowing, which then, in the modern version, it's not the modern version actually, it's just Christian meditation from John Main. The way, now it's the way of unknowing. The discipline of silence. Scripture is a continual source of understanding and inspiration for the Christian pilgrimage and for the way of meditation that makes that pilgrimage a single-minded and unified journey. Consider these words from the book of Revelations in the light of your daily meditation. I heard a loud voice proclaiming from the throne, now at last, God as is dwelling amongst men, he will dwell among them, and they shall be his people, and God himself will be with them. He will wipe away every tear from their eyes. There shall be an end to death, and to mourning and crying and pain, for the older order has passed away. We are led to meditate because we are convinced that the old order has passed away, and because we are convinced that God does dwell amongst us. In faith, we are convinced that God dwells in our hearts, and if only we would take the trouble when time, each of us is invited to find God in our hearts. Everyone is invited to undertake the journey, and then all that is required is that we stay on it. The quality that every one of us needs most urgently is silence. We simply must learn how to be silent and how to remain in silence. Once you enter that silence, once you open your heart to that unpredictable and incomparable experience, you will find that each of us can only be the person we are called to be if we allow that silence to develop in our hearts. Make no mistake about it, the silence that each of us is summoned to enter is the eternal silence of God. This is the silence that each of us can find in our hearts, discovering that will lead you to understand that silence is itself the medium of perfect communication. It is in silence that we communicate at depth and with the truth of holiness. The tradition that we speak from in the monastic order tells us, and quite uncompromisingly, that the way to that silence is a way of discipline. And the discipline is a hard one for us. of the 20th century, because we have to learn to leave behind, indeed, to abandon our own thoughts, words, ideas, and imagination. That is the silence we need, a silence beyond all words, ideas, thoughts, and beyond all imagination. An ancient tradition tells us that the way to that imageless but wakeful silence is the way of meditation, is the way of learning to say in all simplicity and concentration our word, our meditation word, our mantra. There are two particularly important truths to be held, to get hold of when you are starting. First, that you must say the word from the beginning to the end. And this is essential to understand. In our tradition, there is a basic teaching that you must say the word from the beginning to the end of the meditation period. What often happens is that after saying the word for a bit, we begin to feel very peaceful, perhaps very free. The burden of all your ideas and thoughts have been lifted, and then you think, this freedom, this peace is rather pleasant. I just rest in it. I'll let go of the word. I won't say the word. I'll just enjoy the peace. That is the high road to disaster, and you will waste a lot of time unnecessarily if you do not learn at the outset to say your word or words or mantras from the beginning to the end. Secondly, you must learn to meditate. Meditate every morning and every evening. And again, make no mistake about that. That is the minimum. You cannot learn to meditate unless you will build it into your life as a regular pattern, as a regular discipline. It requires considerable sacrifice to find that time every morning and evening. Indeed, considerable discipline is necessary. It is so necessary because the presence of God in His universe, His creation, in your heart, in my heart, is of such importance that we ignore it at our peril. If we ignore it, we will never make sense of either ourselves or the universe, because it leads to such meaning. The journey requires seriousness and discipline, which will lead you to peace and joy that no words can possibly describe. Silence, you will discover, is the medium of unity. You will discover in the science of meditation that your outer life and your inner life are unified. That is why bodily stillness is so important. In meditation, you will discover body and spirit in unity, then in union with God. Nothing is more important for people of our time, and indeed of any time, than to recover this capacity for silence. My recommendation for your daily meditation is to start with a minimum of 20 minutes. Try as soon as you can to put it to 25, and then ideal time is about half an hour, and then take the same time, whether it's 20, 25, or 30 minutes, the same time slot every day. A practical instruction to remember is that the best time to meditate is before a meal. So, if you can in the early morning before breakfast, if you can in the early evening before supper or dinner, God is with His people, God dwells in our midst, and that is why we meditate. To be open to His presence, the presence is eternal. Our awakening to it is daily. We awaken to the great revelation that transforms human consciousness and existence. I heard a voice proclaiming, now at last God has His dwelling amongst men. He will dwell amongst them, and they shall be His people, and God Himself will be with them. We read from the chapter on the discipline of silence from John Maine, The Way of Unknowing, which is a book on sort of Christian meditation. Christian meditation. Canterbury Press. With an introduction from the classic Cloud of Unknowing, Chapter 5.